Senator Kelly, foster care and fashion. So we're going to talk about some foster care.
Okay.
So I was actually at the Capitol in February of 2017, and the House was having some hearings on whether there should be a child welfare task force.
Mm-hmm.
And so I loved testifying, but I was like, yes, there should absolutely
Sure.
be one. And there were lots of folks who felt the same way. And so fast forward, we have one.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that? Because you're on the committee.
I can, and actually I was part of the negotiating team that finalized the bill that created the Child Welfare Task Force.
Okay.
And we worked with our House counterparts to develop what I think was a very appropriate makeup of a task force. You know, instead of our usual legislative task forces, which are a bunch of legislators who may have no idea what they're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, we created this task force so that we have people from the child welfare world who know it. On that task force. So we've got guardian ad litems, we've got judges, we've got social workers, we've got foster parents, and providers. So I think we did the composition in a way that can actually get some expert input as we're developing the reforms that need to go on. We also purposely delayed final recommendations until January of 19 because we felt very strongly that if we tried to implement during the Brownback-Collier administration, that our efforts would be sabotaged.
Interesting.
We wanted to leave. Well, the DCF had very poor leadership throughout that administration, and we didn't trust that they would actually act in the best interest of the kids. They had demonstrated that time and time again. In fact, I can remember at one of the task force meetings, I saw an article that there were 3 sisters missing from a foster home. They'd been gone for 45 days.
Wow.
So I went over to the secretary, and who was an ex officio member, and I said, Madam Secretary, I found this. I'm going to bring this up this afternoon. I said, I don't want to blindside you, but I'm going to bring this up. She knew nothing about it.
Uh-oh.
They'd been missing for 45 days, and she knew nothing about it. I was appalled. And
Many people were.
yes,
because
many people were appalled.
there were lots of news articles about that.
And the governor finally accepted her resignation because it was just one more thing on top of so many other things. You know, the number of child deaths that we've had experienced with the child welfare system, and you know, that's tragic and awful. But the attempt to sort of cover up what had happened was really wrong.
Right.
So
More transparency.
yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
more transparency. You can't fix problems unless you know what they are.
Absolutely.
And so I felt an imperative, you know, and so did my House colleagues. So we put this task force together, and we've been meeting regularly, and hopefully we'll come up with some very robust recommendations that we will start implementing when I'm governor. But I can tell you one thing for sure that we will do is hire more social workers, qualified, licensed social workers to go back into the system. You know, we went from having 5,000 kids in the foster care system when Sam Brownback became governor. We now have over 7,600 kids in the system. And there are a few reasons for that. You know, one, we can't dismiss the drug epidemic.
Right.
That's a problem, but nothing as bad as the fact that we so decimated that agency that we don't have social workers on the front end who can do family preservation
Yes.
and keep kids
Preventative
and families
care.
together.
Yes.
And then on the back end, we don't have social workers to do reintegration so that we can get these kids back into their biological home or into an adoptive home. We just don't have the resources to do
And
that.
Senator Kelly, I mean, continuity of care. I mean, I would work on a case and we would have 5 different social workers.
Yeah.
I mean, that is...
The turnover's been
It's so
horrendous.
disruptive.
Mhm.
It's so disruptive. I mean, you have to rebuild that trust, and they already don't, you know, bio parents already don't trust
Right, exactly.
the system, and now they have to keep rebuilding it. And so it can be...
It's a huge problem.
It
you know.
is.
In addition to just having more social workers, we also have to provide a work environment that is conducive to their being able to do the jobs properly. You know, we've so understaffed it that they're all overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and they're underpaid.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard to get, attract and retain quality folks just because of the work environment and the pay. So we've got a lot of work to do on that particular system. The other factor that plays into that skyrocketing number of kids in our foster care system, though, was the passage in 2015 of the HOPE Act. You talk about bills that are named exactly the opposite, should be the Hopeless Act, because what we did in that is we really pulled sort of the safety net out from underneath our most vulnerable families by reducing food stamp assistance, by reducing child care assistance, by reducing cash assistance. So we took these already vulnerable families, made it worse, and they could no longer keep it together to keep their kids in their own families. Boom, they're in our foster care system.
You know, it's interesting because we know that the statute says that you cannot remove a child because of poverty, right? Because of that. But at the same time, that can absolutely be a reason why a child is not reintegrated, because they don't have the resources to care for the child.
Yeah.
And so I agree. I mean, poverty and just living conditions, it plays such a powerful role in psyche and mental health and all those other different issues. It just compounds it.
Right, and the parents' ability to function and take care of their kids. It really is huge.
It is.
And so we need to revisit that, and we will do that when I'm governor.
Okay.
We know, I mean, we suspected, and I used to say right when we were debating that bill, you know, that this is going to result in an increase in our foster care system because we're taking the safety net out from underneath. And then a couple of years later, KU actually had a study that proved there was a direct correlation between the reduction of that support system and the number of kids in our foster care system. So it's clearly something that we need to go back and to change if we're really going to try to reform the child welfare
And
system.
I think that we need to look at everything.
I do too.
Right? We need to make sure that we're looking at all the different issues, how kids are coming into care, what we're doing on the front end. Like you stated, preventative care is essential. I mean, think if we could never even have these families in the system, I mean, that would be best for the kids.
Well, and I have a plan for that too.
Really?
I do.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in early childhood education. And we have some model programs around the state of Kansas where kids and their families, even prenatally, are being brought into the system, the center. These are public-private partnerships. And they're working with the family and then with the child and the infant. And they spend 5 years doing that, providing wraparound services and, you know, helping parents be good parents, you know, and giving kids the stimulation and the education and the socialization that they need to be successful when they get to kindergarten. I pledge as governor that I will work very hard with our business community and with the state to figure out ways that we can take those model programs and expand them all over the state. So that way, you know, we will be providing support for the families and making sure that that kid is in a situation that's safe and can thrive and can succeed when they get into school.
You're shoring up their foundation.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
And, you know, and it works for the state. It's a great investment on the state's part.
Absolutely.
Our special education costs will go way down. Our incarceration costs will go way down. But we've got to make the investment early.
Yep. And that takes looking at the big picture, not just being reactive, but being proactive, which is so important.
We have to stop legislating on 2-year cycles.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Well, Senator Kelly, thank you for your work within the child welfare system. I know that you've seen a lot of different changes. Is there anything else that you want to add regarding how to make the system work better?
Well, one thing you should know is I sort of come out of the system. You know, that my early work, actually the day I walked out of high school, I went to the Fresh Air Fund camps in New York, working with troubled teens. And then I worked in a prison for boys in Illinois for a while, and then I worked in a state psychiatric facility for children. And so I've been really, that's been sort of a lifelong mission for me, is to ensure that our kids are getting what they need so that they can succeed. And so the child welfare system is will be one of my highest priorities, right along with education.
Well, that is very refreshing to hear, because I think that sometimes we don't devote enough resources to our children, but we pay for it. It's kind of like the parent who doesn't really parent while the child is young, and then when you get older, you're still going to have to deal with this child who is in all types of trouble now. And so it's like, either make the investment initially, or you're going to make it later.
And I remember how much work it was initially with the kids.
Oh my!
It paid off.
Yeah, we're going through that now. So
have fun.
Yes.
But it is worth it. I tell you, it is worth it.
Yeah, we were looking at our kids
to sort of give up your life, to
Yeah.
make sure your kids are on the right track.
I mean, that's the
You'll
best
be
investment.
rewarded in the end.
Yeah, it's the best investment ever. I look at our parents and everything that they did, and I'm like, man, I mean, the goal is to do better than your parents did, right? To make sure that you keep the standard, but then you raise it even higher so that your children have something else to aim for. And so we need to do that with our children here who are in our state, because whether folks realize it or not, it's costing them. It is absolutely costing them. Children who age out of the foster care system, it costs the state, because their numbers are so dismal. I mean, their outcomes are just horrible. And so we need to make sure that we're paying attention. So,
well, and that's why I will engage the business community. They have the most to benefit by if we invest early in those kids, because then they're going to be ready to go to work and have the skills they need, not only academic, but the social skills that they need to succeed in the workforce. And that's why I think I can get businesses to come on board and be a partner with us in this.
You know, you said something. I think that it's so important that we give kids who are in the system and aging out of the system serious access to some of these other types of jobs, not just college. That should absolutely be on the table, and the state pays for it and everything. However, kids aren't really accessing that, but there should be something else. There should be other avenues that these kids can get into to see, okay, if I work hard, I'm able to receive, some money. And so, setting up some maybe internships or externships, but direct partnerships with that targeted population, I think could change, a generation of kids.
I think it could too. I can't give up on the early childhood. We got to go there, because then they can really benefit from that sort of relationship with companies and business people as they get into middle school and high school.
Yeah.
We have done some work, and I plan to build on this with our whole career and tech ed programs, where we are now got programs in our high schools where these kids can come out of high school with a certificate in some sort of trade, or use that to then go on into a community college or into a four-year institution. So we've done some really good stuff on that. Obviously, we need to do more. But that's another area where I really want to establish a public-private partnership, because it's our businesses who will benefit the most from that.
I love that. I think that is a great idea. That is absolutely a great idea. Well, thank you, Senator Kelly. I definitely appreciate the conversation regarding foster care and the state of Kansas. Like I stated, I really like the ideas, and I really love how it's not like you just, read something and created it. I mean, you've been involved in it with your work in the boys' prison and a psychiatric hospital for children, which is a totally different issue. So thank you for your work within the system.
You're very welcome.
All right. The Kansas Adoption Protection Act. You voted on it. Can you talk to us about how you voted and why?
I voted an adamant no, and I actually call it the Adoption Discrimination Bill, because the intent of it really was to restrict the kinds of folks who could be eligible to adopt or foster our children, and I felt that it was wrong. I'm not really enthusiastic about discrimination in any way, but what we found this would do is that we're in dire need of foster homes and adoptive homes.
Yes.
We don't have enough. And so to limit people's ability to adopt because of their sexual orientation or religious affiliation or anything else makes no sense to me. And that's what I felt this bill was doing. It was doing a real disservice, not only to our LGBTQ community or certain religious groups, but also to our children themselves. We need to be growing the number of loving homes that we have available for those kids, not reducing access.
So playing devil's advocate, in reading the bill, it's stated sincerely held religious beliefs. So what do you say when an agency, when it's against their moral beliefs? What do you say for that type of situation?
Yeah, I think that entities, nonprofits, whatever, have every right to have their own guidelines. That's fine. I just don't think we ought to be state sponsoring it. That's the difference. I understand Catholic Charities and other groups would prefer not to place children in homes maybe of a different religion or with a gay couple, and that's fine. That's their choice. I just don't think we ought to be sponsoring it.
Okay.
I don't think we ought to be spending state dollars on that. Just like we shouldn't be doing that for private schools. I believe in school choice. I just don't think that the state ought to be sponsoring private schools.
Okay. And so you voted against it,
I did.
but the governor signed it.
He did.
I was reading that I think at the same time Oklahoma's governor was also signing it. I'm from Oklahoma, so that was interesting. But I was also reading that I believe that there's a challenge to a bill similar to this in another state already. And I feel like it's made its way through the system to where it was declared unconstitutional. Do you think that this bill will likely be challenged in court?
I hope that it is. I'm pretty sure that was the ACLU probably fighting that issue in another state. I think it should be because like I said, I don't believe that discrimination should be allowed, nor is it constitutional. Unfortunately, in the past few years, Kansas has passed a lot of bills that have been ruled unconstitutional in other states or even in our own. So this may just be another one in that laundry list. So we will see.
What was happening? Was it on your radar that this bill was coming? Or, because it just seemed like it just came out of nowhere. Like, I just didn't hear any grumblings or anything, but I'm not there. So,
right.
What was your take on it?
We knew it was coming.
Okay.
There were rumblings within the halls of the Capitol, so we knew this bill was coming.
Okay.
It was done a little bit under wraps so that groups who would oppose it didn't have a chance to really put up a robust opposition. But we in the legislature knew that it was coming, and I think most of us were predetermined how we would vote on something like that, because you just have those of us who will not vote to discriminate, and then those who, depending upon the group, will vote to discriminate.
Okay, excellent. Well, Senator Kelly, thank you for your discussion on this topic. Like I stated, I believe it made national news as well.
It did.
Because we had different tech giants weighing in, I believe, in opposition of the bill.
Well, we actually had 80 companies
really
write to the state of Kansas and say, don't do this. It's a really bad idea economically to do this. If we watch what happened in North Carolina when they passed the bathroom bill, you remember, there were businesses that had been planning to relocate to North Carolina and said, never mind, we're not coming. There are tons of conventions that were canceled because they didn't want to go to a state that was passing discriminatory laws. We shoot ourselves in our foot economically when we pass this kind of legislation, because of the image that it projects to the world, that we're not an open, welcoming state, and we're not interested in supporting the kinds of things that business needs.
Senator Kelly, I want to thank you for this very robust discussion on just the child welfare system, your personal background and connection to it, and then, of course, the Senate bill that we just finished discussing. We're doing this because it's important. It's important for child welfare to be mainstream, right? For it to be in the conversation, for it not just to be something that's a niche for folks who, have an interest in fostering or something else, for people to realize that, kids and their outcomes, it directly affects the state of our nation. I oftentimes in my class, I talk about how if we are a society that does not care about the status of our children, then we begin to get into some third world issues where you have kids who no one cares if they go to school, where they're begging on the side of the road and no one blinks an eye. So it matters. It matters. And you can't, I'm always very conscientious of the slippery slope effect, right? We don't want to begin making these bad decisions, to begin putting our kids in harm's way and think that it's just, they're a byproduct, that it's not important. It is important. And thank you for taking the time with your, I know, awesomely busy schedule.
It is a little on the busy side.
To talk with me today.
Okay.
So thank you.
It's been delightful.
Thank you.